When I was working for the Knicks, it was a tumultuous season. Larry Brown was the coach, Isaiah Thomas was the GM. Now when I think about organizational culture, it was definitely a lesson about organizational culture there, and the good and bad of that.
Welcome, listeners, to our podcast, Play On, Why Street Soccer. My name is John Henderson. I'm the co-host with Neal Levin. He's our nation's leading advocate for street soccer. We have another excellent guest today. His name's Jason Sachs. He's currently the president of the Positive Coaching Alliance. He's served as chief development officer and many other roles for years. Originally from New Jersey, spent a lot of time coaching, mostly in basketball. Also worked in television, worked for the New York Knicks. Now he's currently raising a family in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. Jason, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, Jason, we're really excited. And we've seen the Positive Coaching Alliance around, and you guys are doing amazing work. And I know have been for quite a number of years. And as Mettle Sports weaves its way in and out of the street soccer and youth sports movement, it's almost like the Kevin Bacon game. Within 6 points, we're going to get back to the Positive Coaching Alliance, which is really cool. You guys have done some wild stuff. But hey, let's go back for a while, though, because you've had a pretty cool journey to get to the position that you're in. And I know you've held many positions within PCA, and we'll get to those. But tell us, how you got here, starting with high school, college, and what brought you to this work.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in southern New Jersey. Grew up the youngest of three, playing all sports, and the youngest kid, you're just sort of tagging along, and spent the majority of the nights growing up at a basketball court or sports fields with my older brother and sister and my parents. And sports was always something really important to me and my family. At an early age, I figured out or decided that I wanted to be a sports announcer when I grew up. And a friend of ours said, Syracuse has a really good sports broadcast school. And I was in fourth grade at the time, and I'd like the Syracuse basketball team. So I was like, great, that's where I'm going to go to college. And fast forward, it was the only school I applied to. Ended up going to Syracuse, broadcast journalism major. Got to call football, basketball, lacrosse games on the radio at their famous student-run station WAER, where the greats like Bob Costas and Mike Tirico and Sean McDonough all went through. So that was a pretty amazing experience. My senior year happened to be the year that Syracuse won the national championship with Carmelo Anthony. So that was a fun way to go out. Leaving school, I started working in sports TV production. So worked for TWI, which was the production arm of IMG, and got to work on some big events, NBA All-Star Game, New York City Marathon, some Olympic pre-coverage. But as I was working all these events, I recognized that I was only focused on the TV aspect of it, and there was so much more going into the event. So I went back to school. I wanted to learn more about the sports business, but one of the other reasons for going back to school was I missed being around sports teams and that camaraderie. I was coaching high school basketball on the side, and I was like, man, it'd be great to try to coach. So I went back to NYU, got my master's there, was an assistant coach for the men's basketball team. They're Division III school. They play in the UAA. They play University of Chicago. And so it's a really nice opportunity for kids when they're playing D3 to really travel around the country, playing against other schools. And did that for a year and a half, and then went on to work in the front office of the New York Knicks in basketball operations. And at that point, I thought maybe I want to be a scout. Where I grew up in southern New Jersey, that's where Frank Vogel grew up, who ended up being an NBA coach. And he didn't play in college, but ended up being a video coordinator and worked his way up, same as Eric Spoelstra. And so I was like, hey, maybe that's what I want to try to do. He was actually a counselor at a basketball camp that I used to go to when I was little. So there are all these connections. And then when I was working for the Knicks, it was a tumultuous season. Larry Brown was the coach. Isaiah Thomas was the GM. Now when I think about organizational culture, it was definitely a lesson about organizational culture there, and the good and bad of that. And when I was getting to learn more about just those roles, I wasn't sure if I was ready to commit everything to try to be a video coordinator or scout in the NBA. And so I ended up finishing grad school, moved back home, was substitute teaching, coaching basketball at the high school that I went to. And in early 2006, found a random job posting for this national nonprofit organization, Positive Coaching Alliance. And they were looking for a partnership manager, someone to go to schools and youth sports organization and talk about their programming and try to get the school to partner. And, at that point, I didn't even know what a nonprofit organization was. But what resonated with me was the mission. And I thought to myself, this is exactly the way that I was raised. This is the way that I've coached. Sports is such a powerful vehicle for so many more things in life. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And if I can have a job where I'm going out and talking to others about the power of sport and how they can really teach life lessons and develop character for all those involved, that seems like it would be a pretty fun job. And the fact that PCA was founded at Stanford University on the West Coast, there really wasn't that big of a presence on the East Coast at that time. So I saw that as an opportunity for me to really own and build something. And that was I started with PCA in April of 2006. And so coming up on 17 years here, and have had the opportunity to grow as the organization's grown over that time as well.
Wow, it's an incredible journey, and I want to get more into PCA and the work you're doing. And that initial thought in your mind when you said, this is what I want to do, but I'm struck by the parallels in your pathway from being a young person who set your mind on wanting to do something. You said fourth grade, and your ability to get there, because we talk so much here on Play On about the obstacles that are placed in youth in being able to get to higher levels. And you went right to higher levels, and you set yourself up at fourth grade to do so. And we all know the statistic that, a lot of fourth graders that set their sights on something like that in the sports world drop out by the time they're age 13, because it's just not fun, or there wasn't encouragement, or the parents, or the money. So I'm struck by the fact that you did this in the sports world, not as a player, but as a journalist, effectively. And I see, what were the parental pressures? What was the coaching pressures? Was there somebody during your high school journalism career that was pacing up and down the facilities saying, you need to do this better, you need to work harder at this, and you got to drop and give me 20?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've had a lot of great coaches. Not all of them necessarily have been the best. I've definitely had my fair share of, I played a sport for a couple of years, and after 2 years, because of the coach, I thought, like, I have a lot of other things going on. I don't need this experience, and I'm not gonna play. But basketball was always my first love when it came to sports. And my dad was one of my first coaches, and he was a great coach. And then as I went on, my high school basketball coach was somebody that I still talk to, text on a regular basis about games, and he coached for a long time. I also ran cross country, and my cross country coach was probably a person that had a really big influence on me, because I don't know if I believed in myself the way he believed in me. And so he's really the one that carried me to the career that I had as a runner. And I know that I wouldn't have had that career if it weren't for him. So I think those examples of wow, you can really see that a coach can be that singular factor to propel someone to go on to do things that are really great. My journalism teacher, I had a super close relationship with her. She was great. She provided me she saw the drive and the interest that I had, and she provided those resources. And so listen, I'm lucky, right? I was surrounded by a lot of great mentors and teachers that put in the time, and coaches that had those great experiences. And I also know that a lot of kids don't have that, right? They might not have the parental support. They might not have the coach support. They might not have the teacher support. So I think that what that shows is and there's so much research out there about surrounding kids with multiple adults that are going to stay with them for a long time. And it's not just hey, we're coming in for a season, or I'm going to be your mentor for 3 months, and then I'm going to move on. They need that consistent support. And so between my family, my older siblings, my parents, and then that community from school to sports, I was lucky. I had a lot of great people that supported me, and I knew where I wanted to go. And I think the great thing is that I knew where I wanted to go when I was in fourth grade. And then I got there and I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't exactly where I want to be. And it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. Even when I started at PCA, I wasn't really sure if I was ready or cut out for the job. I was working remotely in 2006 before working remotely was cool. And so I was young, and I needed that connection. And I was like, hold on, what am I doing here? So it took me a while to get my feet under me. And luckily I did, because it's been amazing experience over the last 17 years, and just professionally growing, personally growing, but also helping PCA grow to who we are today.
Suffice to say, you've had a positive coaching experience, and
Yes,
unfortunately, it's not the norm. And so, probably like a soulmate, you know it when you see it, and you saw what
yeah,
PCA was doing, and you were able to recognize it because that was your experience. So that's
yeah.
incredible. So let's dive deeper into that then. So, what is it that struck you about PCA and what they were doing at the time? I know that you said they needed some coaches, but there was something obviously that triggered you to say, this is a place where I'd like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to my experience, right? I played on a basketball team from it was like almost like an all-star team from Southern New Jersey, and we would play against a team from Puerto Rico. And so they would come up over the Christmas holiday, they would stay with our family. And so there was somebody I was paired up with. He would stay with my family. We'd play a couple games. We'd go and we'd go to Philadelphia and do sightseeing and all that. And then in the summer, we would go down and I would stay with that family. I'd become immersed with that family and get to learn the culture in Puerto Rico. And I think I did that for 8 years. And not only did I build a ton of relationships in Southern New Jersey that I then competed against those individuals in high school, but the bonds I made on the Puerto Rico team was something that I think that was the light bulb of like, hey, all this is happening because of basketball. And so if we can have this open mind to what sports can be, that's really going to provide us these really great opportunities. And then if you look at the greater landscape of youth sports, so when I see PCA and I see their mission, I think, wow, that's exactly my experience. And it would be awesome if everybody had that same outlook because we know the power of it. But we also know that there are a lot of negatives that come along with just the youth sports landscape and the high school sports landscape, the win at all cost culture. So it's like, if we can start to change the conversation and change what is the most important thing, then we can start to move things because 35 million kids are playing sports each year outside of schools. It's the largest institution where kids are gathering. And so it's this unbelievable opportunity. And our founder, Jim Thompson, who, used to think about like almost this like utopian culture of like, what if there was this place where kids were active, running around, they were having fun, and they were playing sports, and it was an opportunity. Like that all exists already. Like we have that. We just need the infrastructure and the resources to make sure that everyone that's involved, the entire ecosystem, coaches, parents, organizational leaders, officials, and the kids themselves are on the same page for what that experience can actually be.
In my mind, the wheels immediately go to your mention of people and community and relationships. Yeah. And while basketball was your vehicle, there are other sports and activities that create that positive gathering or community. And I'm struck by your experiences where it was about the people. You were creating relationships through basketball, but you were creating relationships. And the relationship, it comes before the sport. The relationship comes before the skills and the training. And I think, as we say, and it appears that very consistent with Positive Coaching Alliance, is that we have to develop the kid before we develop the athlete. And,
for sure. Yeah. I mean, we have to put the well-being of the child first, right? Anything that happens on the sports field is gravy, but that is the most important thing, because if you look at it, like 99.9% of the kids that are playing youth sports right now aren't going to have sports as a career. They're not going to go on and play professionally, but everything that they learn in sports will impact the way they do things on a daily basis. And I've talked to so many people that they say, when we're hiring, we're looking for people that played sports because we have a sense of some of the lessons that they might know about bouncing back from adversity and, being, working with a group of people, teamwork, those types of things. And I think the most important fact of that is that often people will say that, sports builds character, right? And I think that is true, but it's not going to happen if you just don't pay attention to it, right? Sports, if it's done the right way, can build character, right? Sports just left on its own, you might have crazy parents, going after officials and kids being pressured to do something or being overworked and they're dropping out of sports. So it's not just going to happen, especially as you've seen youth sports become this $20 billion industry. Like, it's not going to just happen. We need to make sure that we are being deliberate, that in order to do this right, then we can see those benefits.
Well, as a high school coach myself, I know that it's not the sport, but the culture of the sport. It's the backbone of the sport. It's not the skill that creates character.
Right.
They fancy me the head of discipline, not because I tell people to drop and give me 20, but when we warm up and we run the field, we go outside the flags instead of inside, not because that's going to make us better in terms of conditioning, but it gets our head on straight and we start thinking about things and we start focusing, and we have routine that gets us into this mode. I'm struck by, I forgot the Admiral's name, who gave the most amazing commencement address about why he makes his bed every morning. And a metaphor for just having that discipline in your life. And of course, that's going to make great CEOs. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that sports has a tremendous impact. But to your point, it's not can you dribble, can you pass, that makes great character.
And with that, those relationships are then going to lead to the better outcomes in the sport that you want to see, right? If a child comes to the practice and has a great rapport and has built that relationship with the coach, they're going to be more engaged, right? Like in our workshops, we talk about creating a climate of mastery, right? So instead of just focusing on the results and comparing yourself to others, and an environment where mistakes are a bad thing, if we create this mastery environment where we're focusing on effort and the process and focusing on learning every day and improvement, then in that type of environment, kids are going to stick to the task longer, they're going to work harder, and they're going to feel like they have more control, and that's going to bring their anxiety down and their self-confidence up. And if you talk to any coach, they're going to say, yes, that's what I want with my team. That's what I want with our program. And so there's a way to do that. It's just a matter of maybe reframing or changing the model of what coaches might think is the way that you're supposed to coach.
I think those are the characteristics that you identify in a truly great team. Even a professional team with the NHL's Blackhawks dynasty, 3 Stanley Cups in 5 years. It wasn't people saying, look at the fabulous way they pass and look at the way they shoot. And it was that they played with such reckless disregard and they were having the best time. It looked like they were playing pond hockey and they were skilled as a result of it. So I couldn't agree more. And for those that aren't watching any of this on our YouTube channel, you'll know that I'm going to need a chiropractor after this, because all I'm doing is nodding yes and nodding yes to what Jason is saying. He's just unbelievable. You're singing a song that we love to hear, and very cool work. So let's get a little deeper into how you do this, then how you incorporate these philosophies into what you're doing over at PCA.
Yeah, so I mean, it really is trying to, how can we reach as many schools, youth sports organization coaches to make sure that this message is getting out there? So PCA really takes a two-pronged approach, right? At the grassroots level, we're partnering with schools and youth sports organizations. We have over 1,000 partners across the country where we are coming in and providing, either in a live interactive session via Zoom now, in an interactive Zoom session, or through our online self-paced courses. We have content for organizational leaders, and we talk to them about setting that organizational culture, and that's really the most important thing they can do as a leader. We talk with coaches. We talk about being double goal coaches. We want to strive to win. We're not anti-competition. We're not everybody gets a trophy. We are striving to win. Competition is an important part of sport. Winning is fun. We want to try to make that part of it, but that's not going to be the only thing. So the second more important goal is, are we teaching those life lessons in character development? We work with parents, and we talk about what their role as a parent will be in the sports experience. And then we also talk with the student athletes as well about how can they not only strive to be the best athlete they can be, but how can they make their teammates better? And then how can they make the game and the community better? So we do that through live workshops. In addition to the workshops, we also have year-round support for the organizations that we work with. So if you're an organization in Chicago and you're saying like, hey, I want my coaches to talk to parents before the season starts and set some expectations, what should they be talking about at a preseason parent meeting? We have that resource that we can send out, right? And if we hear from you, say, hey, we tried this idea and it worked really well, you share it with us, and we can share it out to our network of youth sports organizations. So let's not recreate the wheel. We know that a lot of these organizations are run by volunteers, or people are stretched and they need the resources, what they need when they need it. So if we can help provide that to them, then we will. And then at the national level, we work with national governing bodies, professional sports leagues and teams, really to not only help get the message out so that, our partnership with Little League International, right? If we're going to a local Little League, they probably have heard about us because of our relationship with Little League International. So some of that marketing, some of that co-branding of resources, some national governing bodies actually mandate that PCA is part of their coach certification. And we hopefully want to do even more of that. And then through our relationships with professional, sports teams and leagues, that we're really looking at, they're investing in the community, they're investing in youth sports because those are their future fans. So kids staying involved in sports longer are a benefit to the professional sports leagues and teams. So they see PCA as an opportunity to better that experience and make sure the kids are having the best possible experience that they can have. And then we work with really like other strategic partners in the space, whether it be technology platforms in youth sports, because we want to meet coaches and parents where they are, right? So if they're going to be on a platform, checking the schedule, checking the messaging, if we can get some tips to them on their way to the game, after a game, then we think that'll help improve the experience as well.
Well, it sounds to me that coaching isn't necessarily the best word. It sounds to me what you're doing is you're creating an environment where positive coaching can occur, but not even just coaching. You're creating an environment where learning can occur from all different angles, not just from a coach. And that's might be how the parents interact with the kids. It might be how the amenity is established or set up for the kids. Or so to me, it's much broader than just the traditional concept of one-on-one.
For sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think when Jim founded PCA back in 1998 and he went out and did one of our first coach workshops, coaches came up to him afterwards and said, this is awesome. You're going to go talk to the parents now, right? Because they need this as well. And then it became that whole thing around if we only talk to the coaches, we're not going to change culture. So PCA, while coaching is in the name, it's really culture, right? That's what we're trying. We're trying to change the culture of youth sports. And we talk about like the most important word in our title is alliance, right? And because we need to partner with all these other organizations. And, speaking of that, PCA went through a merger in the last year with another nonprofit organization in this space, Coaching Corps, and their focus was recruiting and training coaches only focused on underserved communities. And how can we make sure that any systemic barriers to provide kids a positive youth sports experience, how do we break those down? And how do we make sure that regardless of any social or economic circumstance, that everyone has access to a positive youth sports experience? So this merger with Coaching Corps has allowed us to basically say, regardless of what type of organization you are, whether you're a competitive travel soccer club, you're a high school, you're a youth sports organization, you're an after-school program, PCA has content, we have things specific to you that will help you, and we can meet you where you are. If you need to recruit coaches, we can help you recruit coaches. If you need parent education, if you want to do a character and leadership development program for your student athletes, we can do that all because it comes down to the culture and making sure that we talk about a systems approach. If everyone is on the same page, that's how you change culture. If you're only talking to the coaches, but parents don't hear the message, then there's probably going to be some tension there.
Well, let's get raw for a minute. We've got some problems out there. And a lot of them have to do with coaches. Of course, there's the parent issue, there's the money issue. We have Lynn Flanagan on. Obviously, she's got a whole list of issues that are contributing to it. We can date it all the way back to the 70s and 80s. But look, just even as we sit here today, the NWSL, professional women's soccer, an abysmal showing of horrible coaching, horrible environments that enable that type of coaching to occur. And even those we can draw all the way down to, the youth sports. We see coaches every day having to be fired or the abuse that we see, mental abuse on our youth, and how many of them are not even going to play Division I because they don't like the stressors anymore because coaches are too intense and too money driven. And we see all this, and it's still there in a big way. And some of the layers have been peeled back where we're seeing it even bigger than we ever even imagined. So I know you'll probably say we still have a lot of work to do, and that's what you're out there doing every day. Yeah. But what of this? I mean, how bad are you seeing it? How does this strike you internally when you see this stuff still happen?
It's a tough thing to figure out, because I think if you look at, I've been with PCA for 17 years, and I think that there has been progress made over that 17 years about people's openness to the idea around positive coaching. If you look at, one of the most prominent coaches when we were founded in our country was Bobby Knight, right? And so that was the mental model of what a coach should be, was probably this, militant, in your face, motivate by fear. That's what a lot of people thought about a coach, right? And a lot of times volunteer coaches at the youth level will think about, how was I coached when I was younger, or what am I seeing on TV, right? And that's how I'm going to model my behavior. So we quickly recognize that has to change, and we need to break down that model and give people a new model to strive for. I think now what we're seeing across many different sports, and I think the NWSL is just the latest, but this is something that it's just the way that things have been done, right? And there needs to be something to break that cycle. In the Yates report around U.S. women's soccer and the NWSL, they talk about women were just used to this type of behavior because it was something that was happening when they were playing youth all the way through their career in the NWSL. So I think the good thing is right now is that, we just last month partnered with the NWSL. We conducted a culture summit for all of the team's coaching staffs and general managers. And now we're working with them on some continuing education for the coaches. So that's at the professional level, right? And they see this as really an opportunity to double down on how can they make sure that they are providing the resources. They need to set the expectation for the coaches, which might be a little different than what coaches are used to. But then the more important step then is to provide them with resources on, here's how to do it within the parameters that we're giving you. And I think also, PCA, we're serving on this U.S. Soccer Safety Task Force looking at youth soccer and what are some of the new expectations and things like that. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to that point. And I want it to get to a point where 17 years ago, when I was talking with youth sports organizations, I would ask them, are you doing background checks, right? And it was 50-50. Maybe some were doing background checks, some weren't. Now everybody does background checks, right? And now everybody is doing safe sport. At what point do we say the mental well-being and the environment that we're creating for our sports organizations, that has to be part of the training? So is it PCA or an organization like PCA to provide that? Because that's a non-negotiable, right? Because if we don't have that positive environment, that caring environment, regardless of the age level, right? That could be the very first time a child plays sports, or it could be somebody that's making a living playing professionally. Like everybody deserves to have that positive sports experience.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're working with NWSL and the other government organizations, but as you pointed out, the concern is that it needs to start at the youth level because there's too much acceptance that this is the way it's done. And I think that comes from the rising tide theory or FOMO. Even if you're a great parent and you're not the one that berates your kid after every practice, you need to work harder, you need to do better. You can be feeling like you're leaving your kid out if you're not doing what Johnny's kid's doing over there, what Sally's kid,
for sure,
her parents are doing over there. And everyone wants to jump in this idea that we have to train 3-year-olds how to be professional athletes in $30 million sports facilities. And that's completely upside down. So of course, when it gets to NWSL, you might expect that to be there. But I do think that background checks are not going to vet that out, because you can't do a background check on someone's inability to connect with a youth, to encourage them, to mentor them, to understand that you're developing a player before you develop an athlete. An individual has to be developed. And I think that I will tell you, my specific concern is that if we come at this from the standpoint of let's engage more, let's do more, let's involve ourselves more, isn't that what kind of got us here in the first place?
Yeah. It's definitely changing expectations a little bit, right? We're setting expectations. Like someone that's been with PCA for as long as I have, we now have, 7-year-olds that are starting to play youth sports. And I see it that, exactly what you said, right? It's so difficult just to play like one sport every season, right? And you're getting asked, hey, do you want to do this off-season thing? Do you want to keep, and you're trying to balance that. Okay, like I want our kids to be active, but also what is too much, right? They're 7 years old, they're in first grade. How much do they need to be doing at this time? And it's very easy to get caught up. Like I need to keep up with other people, right? So I think it's also one is, there is this rush to get to that next level, right? And we talk a lot about kids' stages of development playing, and we talk about that first stage of the romantic stage of just going out and having fun, right? Like my kids love to go out and shoot hoops. They say, in our driveway, just a basketball before school, right? 8-foot basket. They love that, right? That's so much fun. I don't ever want that to go away. If we start putting them in basketball 3 times a week at this age, that's going to go away, right? So, but there are some people that think, okay, my child's 7. If I want them to play high school basketball and then maybe potentially play college basketball, they need to be playing 3 nights a week. So I think it's just, we need to continue to educate, because if you talk to a lot of college coaches, they would prefer that kids are playing multiple sports and they're not getting burned out at a young age. And that's what we're seeing, is that, by the time kids are 6th and 7th grade, they're like, man, another 6-hour drive to a soccer tournament on the weekend. So unfortunately, as I talked about, like some of the acceptance and openness to positive coaching over the last 17 years, that it's been a parallel with the spike in the youth sports economy and everything that's happening with it. So eventually, yes, something's going to have to give. And I think one way that we like to think about it, and we've done this with some of our partners, is that we're never going to go back to the way youth sports was when I was growing up, when you were growing up. But what are some of the things that we can try to change expectations? And I'll talk about one of our partners, the NBA, who has run this junior NBA global championship, and they dubbed it like the Little League World Series for basketball. But what they did was they saw that some of the basketball tournaments out there were just out of control, right? Like playing, 4 games in a day, back-to-back days, getting on a plane, traveling to another. So they not only put parameters on how many games you could play in a day. You play 1 game a day. You can't play more than, 3 days in a row. And when you're at this tournament, there's going to be off-court programming as well. So if we start thinking about a different way to do things, right, to make sure that we're focusing on the whole child and not just them as this basketball player, as this athlete, then that's what's going to have to happen. It's not going to go back to the way it was, but we need to continue to innovate and evolve to make it more positive. And I think there's more and more, and I don't know if it was some of the impact of the pandemic, or like there is much more openness to talking about mental well-being and mental health of our youth and our youth athletes. And so hopefully that continues to rise to the forefront, so that people are focusing on, okay, what changes can we make so that these kids aren't overstressed, they're not overworked, that they have this caring environment. And you know what, maybe we don't have to go to that tournament, or maybe, we don't need to be playing 2 or 3 sports within one season. And I think parents are part of this, is they need to be well educated of what is the appropriate amount of play, what are really those expectations of playing at the next level. And, your investment now doesn't necessarily mean that that's guaranteed. And I think one of the things that Linda Flanagan talks about in her book is like this mindset for parents, that how good or how bad or their kids' experience in youth sports or their performance in youth sport then sort of ties to the status of the adult. And I don't know like why that has become what it's become, but I mean, that's something we need to be able to change.
Well, she opens her book that way. She talks about her.
Exactly. Yeah. Her own experience, right? Like being like, oh, look at this. Like, yeah, you had a great game,
Right.
Totally.
Well, as you recognize, so you're doing great work. You've been there 17 years. There's certainly some progress you've made. And yet at the same time, I think running neck and neck with you is additional abuse where the meter's not necessarily being moved. We talk in terms in the soccer world that there's 3.5 million players registered in the U.S. Soccer Federation, but there's 25 million more who play. So there's access issues, there's communal issues. Yeah. We're still seeing it running in pace with what you're doing. So what's your metrics? What at PCA do you use as your guide on what needs to be done and where it needs to be done?
I think there's a couple different ways we look at metrics. One is, you can look at outcome based and you can look at output based. So if you look at the outputs, right, like this year we'll probably train 65,000 coaches, which is a big number, but in the grand scheme of things, like, there might be 6 million coaches out there, right? So we have a long way to go. And I also think that it's not just on PCA, right? There are many other organizations out there that are doing great work, and we consider allies in this movement. We look at, how many coaches we're training, how many organizations are we partnered with, And the more and more organizations we train and partner with, that will continue to help the overall culture. So that's what we want to focus on. From a outcome basis, I think we want to look at what behavior change are we seeing in the coaches and what are they focused on? And, some of the things we want them to think about is like, overall, is that experience more fun for the kids? Overall, are the kids learning about things like resilience and growth mindset and how to bounce back from mistakes? Like, those are the things that if people take the resources from our training and then are implementing that into their coaching philosophy and into their practices, then we're going to start to see that some of that change in the child that they're coaching. And hopefully those kids are recognizing that they feel like they're in a caring environment, and then they're going to stay involved in that sports longer. And we know that if they stay involved in sports longer, there's going to be more benefits to that. So I think it's a combination of, we want to get that reach up and continue to interact and train more coaches and partner with more youth sports organizations. And if we are doing that, then we're going to see more of these positive outcomes as well. And the more and more we do it, and we have other partners in the space, that's when you're going to start to see even more of a culture shift.
Wow, great stuff. And you and I are going to brew a huge pot of coffee and continue this conversation offline, because we've got a lot to talk about still. And it's just amazing work you're doing. And I want to thank you, Jason, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to learn about you and your history and what brought you to PCA. Jason's got a really cool blog. You can see all this stuff about Positive Coaching Alliance and Jason and his blog at positivecoach.org. We'll put that obviously in the link below on the podcast. And really, again, thank you, Jason. And we applaud your work and hope that we can all be supportive of the great things that you're attempting to achieve there and have been achieving.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and appreciate the work that you all are doing as well. We need more people that are focused on the right way to do youth sports and provide more opportunity and access. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing and shining more light on this as well.
Great. Thank you.
All right, that's a wrap. Jason Sachs, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing your journey. Truly amazing. We'll put links to Jason and the Positive Coaching Alliance down below. Thank you for your shares and your comments and your likes and your downloads. Let's keep the conversation going. We got to give the game back to the youth. Until next time, play on.